There are rooms that change the direction of a person's entire life. Not through anything dramatic, not through explosions or confessions or grand gestures. Sometimes a room changes everything simply because two people enter it on the same night, and one of them says 4 words that the other was never, ever supposed to hear. This room was the grand ballroom of the Hanol Grand Hotel in Seoul. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars. 300 guests dressed in the kind of clothes that cost more than most people's rent. A private charity gala, invitation only, the kind of event where the guest list was more valuable than whatever cause they were pretending to care about. And every single person in that room knew exactly who was arriving at 9 o'clock. Han Seo-jin walked into that ballroom at exactly 9, and the air itself seemed to rearrange. Conversations didn't stop. They shifted. The way water shifts around a stone. People adjusted their posture, lowered their voices, found reasons to angle their bodies in his direction without appearing to look directly at him. Because looking directly at Han Seo-jin was something most people in Seoul's elite circles had learned to do carefully. He was 34. Head of the Seo-jin Syndicate, the most powerful underground organization in the city, operating behind the polished mask of a private equity firm called Seo-jin Capital. In public, he was an investor, a philanthropist, a man whose name appeared on hospital wings and university endowments. In private, he controlled shipping routes, construction bids, and the kind of decisions that shaped entire city blocks. He was not the loudest man in any room he entered. He was simply the one nobody disobeyed. And on this particular evening, Han was scanning the room for something specific. Not a business contact, not a rival. He had noticed someone 30 minutes earlier during the arrival walkthrough. A woman coordinating the event. Tall, dark-skinned, moving through the chaos of setup with the calm authority of someone who had done this 100 times and had no patience for people who made it harder. He had watched her for exactly 11 seconds before he realized he wanted to know her name. And Han Seo-jin was not a man who waited for things he wanted. He found her near the East Wing table arrangement, making a minor adjustment to a centerpiece with one hand while checking her schedule with the other. He approached with the easy confidence of a man who had never been refused anything significant in his adult life. He said something smooth, something about the event being impressive and the person behind it clearly being more interesting than the event itself. Zuri looked up from her clipboard. She gave him exactly 1 second of eye contact. 1 second of those large, dark eyes taking in everything about him. The suit, the posture, the confidence. The 2 men standing 6 feet behind him who screamed security detail. She processed all of it in a single glance. And then she said it. "You're not my type." 4 words, delivered the way a person would say, "The restroom is down the hall." No flirtation disguised as dismissal. No playing hard to get. Just a woman who looked at one of the most feared men in Seoul and felt absolutely nothing. She turned back to her clipboard. Han stood there. His security detail behind him carefully pretended they hadn't heard. A passing server almost walked into him because nobody expected Han Seo-jin to be standing still in the middle of a room looking like someone had just spoken to him in a language he didn't know existed. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that matters. Han had been feared his entire adult life. He had been respected, obeyed, desired by women who saw the power and the suits and the dangerous elegance and wanted proximity to all of it. But nobody, not once in all those years, had ever looked directly at him and been completely, genuinely unimpressed. That woman with a clipboard did not know it yet, but she had just done the single most dangerous thing anyone had ever done to Han Seo-jin. She had made him curious. Now, if that's where this story started, it would be simple. Powerful man meets uninterested woman. He chases. She resists. She eventually gives in. You've seen that story before, but this is not that story. Because to understand why those 4 words cracked open something inside Han that had been sealed shut since he was 9 years old, you need to know who he was before that ballroom. And to understand why Zuri didn't flinch when she looked into the eyes of a man the entire city feared, You need to know what she survived before she ever set foot in Seoul. Let's start with her. 3 years before that gala, Zuri Mwangi was living a completely different life in a completely different city, London. She had moved there at 23 with a degree in hospitality management and the kind of ambition that made people either admire her or resent her depending on how secure they felt about themselves. She was building something, a career, an identity, a version of herself that she had chosen rather than inherited. And for a while it worked. She landed a junior coordinator role at a luxury hotel in Mayfair. She was good at it. She was better than good. Within 18 months, she was managing events that most people her age wouldn't be trusted to attend, let alone run. And then she met Troy. Troy Mensa was charming. And I don't mean that in the casual way people use the word. I mean, he was the kind of man who made you feel like the most important person on earth from the moment he looked at you. He remembered details. He asked follow-up questions. He showed up with exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment, not because he had to, but because he wanted you to know he was paying attention. Zuri fell for him in the way that intelligent, independent women sometimes fall. Not because she was naive, but because Troy was extraordinarily skilled at making his control look like devotion. It started small. He'd suggest she didn't need to work so many late nights, that her boss didn't appreciate her the way he did, that the friends she spent time with didn't really understand her. Each suggestion was wrapped in concern. Each boundary he drew around her life was disguised as protection. By the time Zuri realized what was happening, the walls were already built. For years. That's how long it took. For years of Troy managing her finances, choosing her clothes, deciding which friendships were acceptable and which ones were distractions. He never raised his hand. He never needed to. He had something more effective. He had the ability to make Zuri question every decision she made until she stopped making decisions altogether. She lost her job because she stopped showing up with the same fire. She lost her friends because she stopped calling. She lost herself because losing yourself is what happens when someone spends for years carefully peeling away every layer of who you are and replacing it with who they need you to be. And then one night, Troy said something. Something small. Something he probably forgot 5 minutes later. He looked at her across their living room and said, "Where would you even go?" He meant it as a fact. A statement of how completely he owned her world. But Zuri heard it as a question. And for the first time in 4 years, she answered it. Seoul. She went to Seoul. Not because she had a plan. Not because she knew anyone there. But because it was far. Far enough that starting over wouldn't feel like running. Far enough that Troy's reach, his connections, his charm that opened every door, wouldn't follow her. She arrived with one suitcase, a hospitality degree that technically qualified her for nothing in a country where she didn't speak the language, and the specific kind of stubbornness that only people who have survived being broken understand. 3 years later, Zuri was the senior event planner at the Hanol Grand Hotel. She had learned Korean. Not perfectly, but well enough to run a room. She had climbed from a temporary catering assistant to the person the hotel trusted with their most prestigious clients. She did it by being better than everyone around her and never once expecting anyone to notice. She had one rule, one line she drew in permanent ink across her entire life. She would never, under any circumstances, allow a man to have power over her emotional state again. Not through cruelty, not through charm, not through anything. That rule had kept her safe for 3 years, and it was about to be tested by a man she had not yet looked in the eye. Now, I want you to drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching this from, because this story is about to take a turn, and I need to know who's riding with me. Han Seo-jin was 9 years old when his mother left. He didn't hear a door slam. He didn't hear an argument. He woke up at 2 in the morning because the house felt different. Quieter than quiet. The kind of silence that has weight to it. He walked to the hallway and saw his father sitting alone in the dark living room with a glass in his hand and an expression Han had never seen before and would never see again. His mother's shoes were gone from the entryway. Her coat was gone from the hook. Her scent was already fading from the hallway. She didn't leave a note. Han's father looked up at him standing in the doorway. And instead of comfort, instead of an explanation, instead of any of the things a 9-year-old needed in that moment, his father said 5 words that would build the architecture of Han's entire adult life. She was always going to leave. That was the lesson. That was the foundation stone. Love leaves. Attachment is a weakness. The only thing that stays is power, because power doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. Han's father was not a businessman. He was the head of the Han Seo-jin Syndicate, an organization that had controlled Seoul's underground economy for 2 generations. On paper, the family ran Han Seo-jin Capital, a private equity firm with offices in Gangnam and a board of directors who looked wonderful in photographs. In reality, the firm was the front. The real decisions happened in rooms that didn't appear on any floor plan. Han was not given a childhood after his mother left. He was given a curriculum. His father taught him to read financial statements at 11, taught him to identify a lie by watching a person's hands at 13, taught him the difference between fear and respect at 15, and made sure he understood that fear was faster, but respect lasted longer. By the time Han was 25, he could walk into any room in Seoul and know within 90 seconds who held the real power, who was pretending, and who was dangerous. By 30, his father stepped back. Health problems that the old man refused to acknowledge publicly. Han took control of the syndicate with the calm precision of a man who had been engineered for exactly this purpose. But there was a problem. A problem Han would never admit to anyone alive. The machinery worked, the empire ran, the money flowed, the fear held. But inside the machine, in the place where the operator sits, there was silence. The kind of silence he remembered from that hallway when he was 9. The silence of something missing that he couldn't name, because naming it would make it real. Han had relationships, if you could call them that. Women who were attracted to the power, the suits, the controlled danger. They stayed for the lifestyle and left when they realized the man inside the lifestyle was unreachable. Han let them go the same way every time, without argument, without effort, without feeling anything at all, because feeling something would mean his father was wrong. And if his father was wrong, then everything Han had built his life on was built on a lie. And that was a door he could not afford to open. And then there was Daeshi. Daeshi Park had served the Seo-jin Syndicate since he was 19 years old. He had done things for this organization that he would carry to his grave. He had bled for it. He had removed problems that threatened it. He had been the most loyal soldier the syndicate had ever produced. And when it came time to choose a successor, Han's father chose blood over loyalty. He chose a son, a boy who had been handed everything Daeshi had spent 18 years earning. Daeshi didn't leave. Daeshi did something far more dangerous. He stayed. He smiled. He served. And he waited. Because Daeshi understood something most people don't. The best time to take something from someone is not when they're strong. It's when they're distracted. And Daeshi had been watching Han very carefully for years, waiting for exactly the right distraction to appear. And then there was his mother. Mrs. Kong had returned. 15 years after walking out of that house, she reappeared. Not with an apology, not with an explanation, with a strategy. She had spent those years rebuilding herself in society circles, and she returned to the Seo-jin family not as a wife or a mother, but as an asset. She understood public image. She understood how to make dangerous men look respectable. And the syndicate needed that skill now more than ever as legitimate business interests grew. Han let her back in, not because he forgave her, but because she was useful. And because somewhere inside the machinery, the 9-year-old boy was still standing in that doorway, and that boy would let his mother walk through any door if it meant she might stay this time. Mrs. Kong had one condition for her continued involvement. The family's public image had to remain impeccable. And impeccable, in her mind, had very specific definitions about who could stand beside her son in public. That brings us back to the ballroom. To the night Han Seo-jin walked into a charity gala and encountered the one thing his entire life had not prepared him for. A woman who looked at everything he was and said, "You're not my type." Now let me ask you something. Based on everything you know about these two people so far, who do you think is going to break first? Drop your answer in the comments. Because what happens next is not what either of them expected. Let's go back to that moment. Let's see it the way it actually happened. The gala was in full motion. 300 of Seoul's most powerful people circulating through the Hanul Grand's ballroom. Zuri had been on her feet since 6 that morning. 14 hours of managing caterers, adjusting lighting, handling a last-minute seating crisis because a corporate chairman refused to be placed at the same table as his former business partner. She had solved every problem with the quiet efficiency that had made her the hotel's most trusted planner.
She was not thinking about men.
She was thinking about the dessert course timing. Han spotted her from across the room. He had been watching her for close to 30 minutes by then, though nobody around him could tell because Han's version of watching someone looked identical to his version of surveying a room for threats. His eyes followed her as she moved. The way she handled a panicking server with 3 calm words. The way she adjusted a centerpiece and then stood back to check it from the guest's perspective. The way she carried herself like the room was hers and everyone in it was a guest she had graciously allowed to attend. He walked toward her. His security detail, 2 men who had been with him for 6 years, hung back. They knew the look, not the business look. Something else. Something they had never seen before. "You're not my type." She said it without looking up from her clipboard. No pause for dramatic effect. No smile to soften it. No second glance to see how it landed. She simply made a factual statement and moved on with her evening. Han stood there, the most powerful man in a room full of powerful men, standing in a 5-figure suit being dismissed by a woman holding a clipboard and a ballpoint pen. And something happened to his face. Something his security detail noticed and would discuss between themselves for weeks afterward. The mask slipped. Not much. A millimeter. But on a face that never moved without permission, a millimeter was an earthquake.
He didn't pursue her further that night.
That's the detail that matters. A man used to getting what he wanted did not press. He did not pull rank. He did not have someone on his staff approach her instead. He simply stood there for 5 seconds, then turned and walked back to his table. But here's the thing the audience needs to understand. Here's the piece that makes everything that follows inevitable. Han was not insulted. He was not angry. He was not calculating a strategy to win her over. He was doing something far more dangerous than any of those things. He was feeling something. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the silence inside the machine had been interrupted. And the interruption felt like waking up. Zuri went home that night and didn't think about him at all. Not once.
She made tea.
She reviewed the post-event report. She fell asleep at 11:30 with her laptop still open on the bed. She had no idea that she had just done the single most disruptive thing anyone had done to the Seo-jin empire in a decade. Not with a business threat. Not with a legal challenge. With 4 words and a complete lack of interest. But the dramatic irony here, the thing that makes everything that's coming so devastating, is this. Zuri was right.
Han was not her type.
The version of Han that the world knew, the cold operator, the untouchable boss, the man who wore power like armor, that man was everything she had learned to recognize and avoid. But there was another Han, the one standing in the doorway at 9 years old, the one who had never been seen by anyone without wanting something from him, the one who heard "you're not my type" and didn't hear rejection. He heard the first honest thing anyone had said to him in 25 years. That was the man who was going to change Zuri's life. And she had no idea he existed. The next morning, Han did something he had not done in years. He adjusted his schedule. Not for a deal. Not for a threat. He adjusted his schedule to create a reason to visit the Hanul Grand Hotel. And this is where the story truly begins. Over the next 2 weeks, Han Seo-jin became the Hanul Grand Hotel's most frequent visitor.
And he was careful about it.
Never obvious. never desperate. He booked a private dining room for a business dinner that could have been held at any of the 17 restaurants he already controlled. He attended a wine tasting event that he had zero interest in. He found 3 separate legitimate reasons to be inside that building. And every single time, he found a way to be in the same room as Zuri. The first encounter went the same way as the gala. He said something. She gave him the same flat, unbothered stare. She was polite because she was a professional, but polite from Zuri felt colder than rudeness from anyone else. The second time, he changed approach. He didn't try charm. He asked her a question about the event logistics. A genuine question. Something that acknowledged she was good at what she did rather than just a woman he was trying to impress. Zuri answered. Briefly. Professionally. But she answered. And for half a second, her eyes met his with something other than dismissal. It was curiosity.
Small.
Guarded. But there. The third time, Han did something that surprised even himself. Zuri had a supplier crisis. A floral company that provided arrangements for the hotel's high-end events had suddenly breached their contract, moved to a competitor hotel, left the Hanul with a major corporate event in 4 days, and no floral provider. It was the kind of problem that could damage Zuri's professional reputation if it wasn't solved quickly and invisibly.
Han heard about it.
Not because he was monitoring her, because he had ears in every major hospitality business in Seoul, and when the Hanul's name came up in relation to a supply chain problem, it reached his desk within hours. He made one phone call. 20 minutes later, the best floral supplier in Seoul had not only agreed to take on the Hanul contract, but had offered terms significantly better than what the previous company had charged. Zuri never knew.
Not then.
The hotel's procurement team thought they had gotten lucky.
But Zuri noticed something.
She noticed that the solution had appeared too cleanly, too fast, too perfectly. And she was a woman who had spent 3 years training herself to notice when things were too convenient, because in her experience, convenience always came with a price tag. She didn't confront Han, but the next time she saw him at the hotel, something in her expression changed. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't gratitude. It was the cautious, evaluating look of a woman who is trying to determine whether the person in front of her is building a bridge or a trap. The shift happened on the rooftop. Zuri was taking a 10-minute break during a long event setup. She went to the terrace on the 14th floor because nobody ever went there during working hours. She was leaning against the railing, looking at the Seoul skyline, letting herself breathe for the first time in 12 hours. And Han was there, not because he had followed her, because he had been meeting with the hotel's general manager about an investment opportunity and had taken the terrace exit instead of the lobby because he did not feel like being recognized.
They were both surprised.
And for the first time, they were both off script.
No gala.
No professional context. No clipboard between them. Just 2 people on a rooftop at sunset who were both, in that moment, alone. Han didn't try a line. He said, "I didn't know anyone else used this terrace." Zuri said, "I come here to remember that the city is bigger than whatever room I've been stuck in for the last 10 hours. And they talked. Not about business. Not about the gala. Zuri asked him why he kept showing up at the hotel. She asked it directly, the way she asked everything. And Han, for reasons he could not explain, told her something close to the truth. Because the last time someone was honest with me, I was 9 years old. And then you were honest with me at that gala. And I suppose I wasn't ready for it to only happen once." Zuri studied his face for a long time after he said that. She was looking for the performance, the angle, the manipulation. And for the first time, she couldn't find it. She didn't smile. She didn't soften. But she didn't leave. And for both of them, in that moment, staying was the most radical thing either of them had done in years. It was Sarah who broke the ice completely. Han's younger sister had heard about the woman at the hotel. Not from Han. Han would never discuss something like this. But Sarah was a 24-year-old medical student with an instinct for reading her brother's behavior, and when Han adjusted his schedule 3 times in 2 weeks for reasons that didn't make financial sense, Sarah noticed. She found Zuri at a coffee shop near the hotel one afternoon, walked straight up to her table, sat down without being invited, and said, "You're the woman who told my brother he's not your type. I need to buy you a coffee immediately because no one has ever done that and I've been waiting my whole life." Zuri laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of sound that Zuri herself hadn't heard come out of her own mouth in longer than she wanted to think about. Sarah was impossible not to like. She was warm and open and genuine in a way that felt almost aggressive in its honesty, and Zuri recognized something in her immediately. The specific quality of a person who has grown up surrounded by masks and chosen not to wear one. They talked for 2 hours. Sarah told her about Han, not the empire, not the reputation. She told her about the brother who used to build blanket forts with her when she was small. The brother who paid for her medical school tuition without telling their father. The brother who sometimes called her at midnight for no reason, said nothing important, and hung up after 5 minutes, because midnight was when the silence in his apartment became loudest. Zuri listened to all of it with the careful attention of a woman who is terrified of what she was starting to feel. That night, alone in her apartment, Zuri stood at her window and had a conversation with herself that she had been avoiding for weeks. She was feeling something. Something she had built her entire post-Troy life to prevent. Not attraction. Attraction she could manage. Attraction was a biological response that could be acknowledged and dismissed. This was different. This was the terrifying recognition of seeing someone else's wound and realizing it looked like yours. This was the dangerous warmth of being near someone who made the effort to see you rather than the image you performed for the world. She pressed her hand against the window glass and looked at the city lights and told herself every reason this was a terrible idea. He was powerful. He was dangerous. He was connected to a world that could consume her. Every alarm system Troy had forced her to build was ringing at full volume. But there was another voice. Quieter. Older. The voice of the woman who had existed before Troy broke everything. That voice asked a single question that Zuri could not answer. What if he's not Troy? What happened over the next several weeks was not a courtship. It was a negotiation between 2 people's armor. Han invited Zuri to a private dinner. Not at a restaurant where they would be seen. At a quiet place he knew where the food was excellent and the owner owed him enough to keep the room empty for an evening. Zuri almost didn't go. She sat in her apartment for 20 minutes after getting dressed, keys in her hand, having the argument with herself that people have when they know they're about to do something that could change everything. She went, and the dinner was nothing like what she expected. Han didn't perform. He didn't display wealth or power or any of the signals that men like Troy had used as bait. He asked her questions and then actually listened to the answers. He told her about Sarah. About his late father's obsession with classical music that seemed incompatible with everything else the man represented. He told her that he had been to London once when he was 20 and had gotten completely lost on the tube and had to ask a stranger for help, and that it was one of the best days of his life because nobody in London knew who he was. Zuri found herself telling him about her mother, about growing up watching a woman who worked 16-hour days so her daughter could have choices she never had. About how the guilt of that sacrifice sometimes felt heavier than gratitude. She told him things she had not told anyone in Seoul, not because he pulled them out of her, but because the space he created felt safe enough to put them down. By the end of the dinner, neither of them had addressed what this was. But when Han walked her to her taxi, there was a moment, a pause. The kind of pause where 2 people are standing close enough to feel each other's warmth and the air between them is making a decision that neither of them has consciously made yet. Zuri looked up at him, and instead of the dismissal she had given him at the gala, her eyes held something new. It terrified her, but she didn't look away. And this is the part of the story that makes what's coming next so devastating. Because while these 2 people were carefully, cautiously lowering the walls they had both spent their entire lives building, Three separate forces were moving in the shadows to tear them apart. Daeshi had been watching, carefully, patiently, the way a man watches who has spent years learning that patience is the deadliest weapon in any arsenal. He had seen Han's schedule changes. He had noted the hotel visits. He had identified Zuri within the first week and had already begun building a file. Not a file of information, a file of fabrication. Daeshi understood something fundamental about Han's psychology. Han's greatest fear was betrayal. It had been coded into him at 9 years old when his mother left without explanation. The most effective weapon against Han was not a rival gang or a business threat. It was the suggestion that someone he had allowed close was working against him. And so Daeshi began to construct, with the careful precision of a man building a bomb, a lie designed to look exactly like proof. Troy Mensa stepped off a flight at Incheon International Airport on a Tuesday evening. He had spent 3 years looking for Zuri. Not constantly. Troy was a businessman, and businessmen understand investment cycles. He had tried her old contacts first. Her family, what little of it she still spoke to. Her former colleagues. Nobody knew where she had gone, or if they did, they weren't saying. But Troy was patient. And eventually, a mutual acquaintance posted a photograph from a Seoul hospitality conference, and in the background, blurred but unmistakable, was Zuri. Troy booked a flight within 48 hours. He told himself it was because he loved her. He told himself that what they had was real and that she had left because she was scared, not because he had done anything wrong. Troy had a remarkable ability to rewrite history so that he was always the hero, and he had rewritten their 4 years together into a love story that simply needed its second act. He arrived in Seoul with a plan, a smile, and the absolute certainty that Zuri would see him and remember what they had. He was wrong, but he wasn't going to accept that easily. And Mrs. Kong already knew. She had known before Daeshi, before Troy. She had watched her son at the gala, and she had seen the millimeter shift in his expression when that woman spoke to him. A mother knows, even a mother who abandoned her child. Perhaps especially that kind of mother, because a woman who left carries a particular guilt that makes her hypervigilant about the choices her child makes in her absence. Mrs. Kong had photographs of Zuri on her desk within a week. She had a background check completed within 2. She knew about the East African heritage, about the London years, about the event planning career. She knew everything except the parts that would have made her see Zuri as a human being rather than a threat. And in Mrs. Kang's mind, Zuri was a threat, not because she was a bad person, but because she was the wrong person. A black African woman standing beside the head of the Han Seo-jin syndicate would be a scandal in the world Mrs. Kong had spent 15 years rebuilding. It would undo everything. The social alliances, the carefully managed public image, the future she had planned for Han that included a Korean wife from an appropriate family, producing appropriate heirs, maintaining appropriate appearances. Mrs. Kong did not see racism in her calculations. She saw pragmatism, and that is what made her the most dangerous person in this story. Because a person who believes their cruelty is reasonable will never question it. Now I need you to stop for a moment and really think about this. Zuri has 3 threats closing in on her. A fabricated betrayal, a man from her past, a mother who sees her as a stain, and the one person who could protect her from all of it. He's the same person she's most afraid to trust.
Drop a comment right now.
Tell me which threat you think is going to hit first, because the answer is going to surprise you. It happened on a Tuesday. All 3 threats on the same day. Troy found her first. Zuri was walking from the hotel to the subway station, the same route she took every evening. And there he was, standing on the sidewalk like he had been placed there by a director who understood exactly how to make a woman's blood turn cold. Zuri. Her name in his voice. She hadn't heard it in 3 years. 3 years of work, of building, of learning to sleep without checking the door lock for times. 3 years of becoming a person who belonged to herself again. And one word from his mouth put cracks in all of it. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She stopped walking and looked at him the way a person looks at a wound they thought had healed that has just reopened. "You look incredible," Troy said. The smile, the warmth, the focused attention, all the weapons deployed in perfect formation. "I've been looking for you." "I know," Zuri said. "That's why I didn't want to be found." Troy stepped closer, not aggressively. That was never his method. He stepped closer the way he always did, with the gentle persistence of water wearing down stone. He told her he understood, that he had made mistakes, that he had changed, that he just wanted to talk. One conversation. That was all. And then he said the sentence that Zuri felt in her spine. "I know you're seeing someone. A Korean man. Powerful. I've heard things about him, Zuri. Dangerous things. And I'm worried about you." He had done his research. He was already building the narrative. The narrative where he was the concerned protector and Han was the threat. Zuri told him to leave Seoul. She told him she would not say it twice. And she walked away with her hands shaking inside her coat pockets. That same evening, Daeshi made his move. He requested a private meeting with Han. He came with a folder. Inside the folder were fabricated communication records suggesting that Zuri had been in contact with members of a rival syndicate. Fake messages, doctored timestamps, a falsified trail showing that hotel event schedules, specifically the ones Zuri managed, had been shared with a competing organization that had been circling Seo-jin territory for months. Daeshi presented it all with the expression of a loyal lieutenant who hated delivering bad news. He let long pauses do the heavy lifting. He didn't accuse Zuri directly. He simply laid out the evidence and let Han's psychology do the rest. "I'm not saying it's true," Daeshi said. "I'm saying it needs to be investigated. And I'm saying it because I'd rather you hear it from me than from someone who doesn't care about you." Every word was calculated. Every pause was engineered. Because Daeshi understood that the fastest way to turn Han against someone was not to attack. It was to plant a seed of doubt in the exact spot where Han's deepest wound lived. Betrayal by someone he had let close. His mother all over again. Mrs. Kong came to him the same night. She did not know about Daeshi's play. Her timing was coincidence. But coincidence, when it aligns with strategy, becomes devastating. She came to his private office. She sat in the chair across from his desk as if she had been sitting there for decades instead of the few months since her return. And she spoke with the measured calm of a woman who had rehearsed this conversation for weeks. She told Han that his association with Zuri was becoming visible, that people were talking, that the wrong people were paying attention. She told him that the Seo-jin family had spent generations building a specific position in Seoul society, and that position required specific choices about who stood at the head of that family. She never used the words black or African. She didn't need to. Her meaning was pristine. And then she delivered the ultimatum. Choose the empire or the woman, because you cannot stand in front of both, and I will not stand behind you if you try. Han looked at his mother across the desk. The woman who had left him. The woman who had returned only when she needed something. The woman who was now telling him who he was allowed to care about. And for the first time, the machinery inside him began to malfunction. Because Daeshi's evidence was sitting in a folder on his desk. And his mother's words were hanging in the air. And the two most destructive forces in his life were both pointing at the same target.
Zuri.
Sarah called Zuri that night. Not because she knew about Daeshi's fabrication. Because she sensed something was wrong. She had seen Han's face when he came out of the meeting with Mrs. Kong, and she had seen that expression before. The shutting down expression. The one that preceded every cold, calculated decision her brother had ever made. Something's happening, Sarah told Zuri. I don't know what. But my brother's face looks the way it looked when he was 9. And that's never good. Zuri sat on the edge of her bed and felt the walls closing in from every direction. Troy in the city. Something wrong with Han. A feeling in her gut that the peace she had built was cracking. And the worst part was the voice in her head. Not the voice that told her to run. The other one. the one she was more afraid of. The voice that said, "If he needs you, are you going to let him face it alone?" He found her in the hotel lobby after hours. Zuri was leaving a late planning session. The lobby was empty. The marble floors were polished to mirrors. The chandeliers were dimmed to their overnight setting. The silence was the kind that makes footsteps sound like accusations. Han was waiting near the entrance, standing still, the way he stood when he was about to do something he couldn't undo. The folder was in his hand. Zuri knew immediately, not the specifics, but the shape of what was coming. She had spent 3 years learning to read the weather in people's faces, and Han's face was a storm. "I need you to explain this." He opened the folder, held it out, not thrown, not slammed on a surface, held out with the careful precision of a man who is giving her one chance to make this not true. Zuri looked at the contents, the messages she had never sent, the contacts she had never made, the evidence of a betrayal she had never committed. She studied every page. She took her time, and when she looked back up at him, her face carried something worse than anger. It carried recognition. She recognized this. The accusation based on fabricated evidence. The demand to explain herself. The trial where the verdict was already decided. She had lived this before. Different man, different city, same architecture. "You already believe it," she said. "I'm asking you to explain it."
No.
"You're asking me to defend myself against something someone else created. And I've done that before. I spent 4 years doing that before. I will not do it again.
Not for you.
Not for anyone." She walked away, not running, not crying, walking. The way a person walks when every step is a choice to keep moving forward instead of turning around and begging someone to believe them. Because that was the line. That was Zuri's line. She had crossed it with Troy. She had begged. She had explained. She had performed innocence for a man who had already decided she was guilty. And it had nearly destroyed her. She would not do it again. Even for Han. Even for the man who had made her believe, for a few terrifying weeks, that maybe not every powerful man with a beautiful smile was designed to break her. Han stood in the lobby alone, the folder in his hand, the silence of the empty room around him, and the look on her face as she walked away burned into his memory with the same permanent scar quality as the night his mother left. He had done it, the thing he feared most. He had let someone close, and they had betrayed him, except they hadn't. But he didn't know that yet. In the taxi, Zuri cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. The quiet, shaking kind of crying that happens when a person's body releases something the mind refused to let go. She pressed her hand against her chest and looked out the window at the city she had run to, the city she had rebuilt herself in, the city that was now holding the wreckage of the first time she had let herself feel safe with someone since Troy. And here's the thing that makes this moment the cruelest in the entire story. Zuri was right to walk away. Every lesson she had ever learned told her to walk away from a man who chose suspicion over trust. Every survival instinct she had built told her to protect herself first. But walking away from someone who doesn't deserve you is easy. Walking away from someone who might deserve you, but is too broken to show it? That's the kind of wound that doesn't heal with distance. Back in his office, Han stood over his desk and for the first time in his adult life, lost control. Not violently, not dangerously. He swept the contents of his desk to the floor in one motion and then stood there, both hands flat on the empty surface, breathing. The papers on the ground. The folder. The evidence that was supposed to confirm what he already feared. But the confirmation didn't feel right. It didn't feel like clarity. It felt like poison. Because Han's body knew something his mind was still fighting. The look on Zuri's face when she walked away was not the face of someone who had been caught. It was the face of someone who had been wounded. And the difference between those two things was something Han understood better than anyone alive because he had spent his entire life studying faces for exactly those distinctions. Something was wrong. Not wrong with Zuri. Wrong with the evidence. Wrong with the timing. Wrong with the way everything had converged so perfectly on the same night to push him toward exactly the decision he had made. The 9-year-old boy in the doorway was screaming something the 34-year-old man almost couldn't hear. What if she didn't leave? What if you pushed her out? Before we go into what happens next, I need you to make a prediction. How do you think this ends? Does Han figure out the truth in time? Or has he already lost Zuri forever? Drop your answer now, because the next 15 minutes are going to change everything you think you know about this story. Sarah found it, not because she was looking for a conspiracy, because she was looking for the truth. After calling Zuri that night and hearing the silence on the other end of the line that was worse than any crying, Sarah did what Sarah always did. She refused to accept the surface of things. She started with the evidence Daeshi had presented. She knew about it because she had walked into Han's office the next morning and seen the folder on the floor among the scattered papers. She picked it up. She read it, and something nagged at her. Not any single detail. The whole shape of it. It was too clean, too complete, too perfectly designed to do exactly what it had done. Sarah was a medical student. She understood diagnostics. She understood that when symptoms present too perfectly, when every test confirms exactly the diagnosis you suspected before you ran the tests, that's not confirmation. That's contamination. She spent 3 days pulling at threads. She contacted a friend who worked in telecommunications and had the message records checked. The timestamps were fabricated. The communication trail led to a server that didn't belong to the rival syndicate. It belonged to an intermediary, someone Daeshi had used before for operations Han didn't know about. When the full picture emerged, Sarah sat in her dorm room at 2 in the morning and felt the kind of clarity that is indistinguishable from grief.
Daeshi.
The man who sat beside her brother every day. The man who called himself loyal. He had constructed the entire thing. Every piece of evidence. Every breadcrumb. All designed to detonate the one vulnerability in Han's psychology that no amount of power could protect. She called Han at 2:15 in the morning. He didn't interrupt. He didn't pace. He stood in the dark of his apartment and let his sister's voice disassemble the lie piece by piece. And when she was done, the silence on the line was the loudest thing either of them had ever heard. "There's more," Sarah said. "There's a man from her past. He's in Seoul. His name is Troy, and I think he's been talking to Daeshi." The connection clicked into place with the terrible precision of a lock turning. Daeshi hadn't just manufactured evidence. He had coordinated with Troy. Two men with two different reasons to separate Zuri from Han, working together because their interests aligned even if their motives didn't. And behind both of them, the silent hand that had pushed all of this into motion at the exact right moment. Mrs. Kong, who hadn't fabricated evidence but had created the pressure that made Han vulnerable to believing it. Who had delivered her ultimatum on the same night because she had known, whether consciously or not, that the combination would be devastating. Han hung up the phone and stood in the dark. And for the first time since he was 9 years old, he made a decision that had nothing to do with the Empire. What Han did next was precise. Not emotional. Not chaotic. Precise. He dealt with Daeshi first. Not with violence, though the Syndicate expected violence. Han understood that killing Daeshi would make him a boss. Exposing Daeshi would make him something more dangerous. He gathered the proof. He assembled the Syndicate's senior members. And he laid out every fabrication, every forged document, every backdoor communication, in front of the same men Daeshi had spent years building loyalty with. Daeshi's power evaporated in 20 minutes. Not because Han destroyed him, because Han showed everyone the truth and let the truth do the work. Daeshi was removed from the organization, not killed, exiled, which in their world was worse, because exile meant living with what you lost without the dignity of an ending. Troy was simpler. Han didn't touch him. He didn't need to. He had Troy's complete financial and business profile assembled in 6 hours. Every deal Troy had in Asia, every contact, every partnership that kept his business running. Han made 3 phone calls. Within 48 hours, every business door in Seoul that Troy needed open was permanently closed to him. Troy left Seoul on a Friday morning. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. He didn't need to. He understood the message. The message was that there was a man in this city who was willing to dismantle Troy's entire professional existence without breaking a single law, and that man would do it again, faster, if Troy ever came back. Mrs. Kong was the hardest, because Han could not exile his mother, and he could not cut her from his life the way he could cut Daeshi or Troy. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because the 9-year-old in the doorway still wanted his mother to stay, even now, even after everything. He sat across from her in her private sitting room, and he told her the truth. All of it. The things he had never said in the months since her return. That her leaving had broken something in him that shaped every decision he had made since. That her ultimatum was not protection. It was control. That she had returned to the family not because she loved them, but because she needed them, and that he had allowed it because he was still, after all these years, trying to earn something from her that she was not capable of giving. He told her that Zuri was not a threat to the family's image. She was the only honest thing in his life. And that if his mother could not see that, then the image she was protecting had no value worth maintaining. Mrs. Kong listened to all of it in silence. Her face showed nothing and everything at once. The composure held, but her hands, resting on the arms of her chair, were trembling. Han stood up. He told her she could stay. He told her the family was still hers, but the conditions had changed. She no longer had a vote on who stood beside him. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't punishment. It was the first time Han had ever drawn a boundary with his mother. And the cost of it was written across his face when he walked out of that room.
Now.
He had done everything. He had removed every threat. He had dismantled the conspiracy. He had confronted the people who tried to destroy what was growing between him and Zuri. But none of that mattered, because the person he needed to face now was not an enemy. She was the woman who had walked away from him in an empty hotel lobby. And she had walked away for reasons that were entirely valid. Reasons that had nothing to do with fabricated evidence and everything to do with the fact that when she needed him to trust her, he didn't. If you know someone who's ever had to choose between protecting themselves and trusting someone, share this video with them right now. Because what happens next is for every person who's ever been afraid to let someone in. He didn't call. He didn't send a lieutenant. He didn't arrange a meeting through Sarah. Han Seo-jin stood outside Zuri's apartment building at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night in a coat and sweater, without security, without a plan, and without any of the armor that had kept him safe for the last 25 years. If you had told any person in Seoul's underworld that the head of the Seo-jin syndicate was standing alone on a residential sidewalk looking up at a window with the expression of a man who has no idea what to say when the door opens, they would not have believed you. But that's the thing about love. Real love. Not the performed version. Not the controlled version. The kind that actually changes the composition of who you are. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes you willing to be weak in front of exactly one person. And Han had never been willing to be weak in front of anyone. Until now. Zuri opened the door. She was in a sweater and loose pants. Her hair was down. Her eyes were tired and red in the way that told him she had been crying, not tonight, but on many nights since the lobby. She looked at him, and her face showed everything at once. The anger, the hurt, the part of her that wanted to close the door, and the part of her that had been waiting for him to show up. I was wrong, Han said. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let me explain. Not any of the strategic openings a man like Han would normally calculate. Just, I was wrong. He told her everything, standing in the hallway outside her apartment. Not inside, because he understood that he did not have the right to enter her space until she invited him. He told her about Daeshi's fabrication, about Troy's involvement, about his mother's ultimatum. He told her what he had done about all of it, not to impress her, but so she would know that the threats were gone. And then he told her the thing that mattered more than any of that. When you walked away in that lobby, you were right to walk away. You told me who you were. You told me what you had survived. You told me, without saying a word, that you would never again defend yourself to a man who had already decided not to believe you. And I became that man. The evidence was a lie, but my willingness to believe it was real. And that willingness came from a wound that I have been carrying since I was 9 years old. A wound that has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with a boy who decided that if people leave, it must be because they were never really yours to begin with. He paused, and the next words were the hardest he had ever spoken. You are not my mother. You are not a betrayal waiting to happen. You are the first person who has ever looked at me and seen the version of me that existed before the Empire consumed everything. And I would rather stand in this hallway every night for the rest of my life than go back to the silence that was there before you existed in my world. Zuri looked at him, the man who controlled an empire, standing in a hallway, without security, without armor, without the mask that had kept him alive for 25 years. Looking at her with the eyes of a 9-year-old boy who just wanted someone to stay. She reached for his hand. Not a hug, not a kiss, not any of the dramatic reunions that stories like this usually deliver. She reached for his hand the way a person reaches for something they thought they had lost.
Carefully,
Slowly, with the understanding that what you are holding is fragile and precious, and you will not make the mistake of gripping too hard. Their fingers interlocked in the hallway, and the silence between them was no longer the silence of distance. It was the silence of two people who had run out of words because the words had finally been said. Zuri pulled him gently inside.
the door closed.
And for the first time in either of their lives, the armor was off. Completely. Both of them standing in the same room without masks, without performance, without the walls that had kept them safe and kept them alone. Just two people who had survived enough to know that this kind of moment doesn't come twice. That should be the ending. That should be where this story wraps up in a neat bow, and the credits roll, and you feel warm inside, and move on with your day. But this story is not done. Because exactly 17 minutes after Zuri pulled Han inside her apartment, his phone rang. He almost didn't answer. Almost. But the number on the screen was one he hadn't seen in 6 years. A number that belonged to a man who was supposed to be gone. A man whose absence had been the foundation on which Han's entire leadership was built. He answered. He listened for 11 seconds. He hung up. Zuri saw his face change. She had learned to read that face over weeks of careful attention. She had seen the cold mask. She had seen the rare softness. She had never seen what she saw now. Something behind his eyes that was older than everything else. Older than the Empire. Older than the scar. A fear that predated every version of Han she had ever encountered. "What is it?" she asked. The woman he had just fought to keep. The woman who had just let him back in. The woman who deserved to finally have peace. And he said 5 words that turned the entire story on its axis. My father is coming home. The old boss. The man who built the Seo-jin syndicate from nothing. The man who had ruled with a philosophy that made Han's leadership look gentle by comparison. The man who had stepped back 6 years ago for health reasons that nobody fully believed. The man whose shadow Han had been living under even in his absence. He was coming back. And nothing, not the Empire, not the threats they had just survived, not the love they had just reclaimed, nothing was going to be the same. Zuri looked at the man standing in her apartment and understood with absolute clarity that the story she thought was ending was actually just beginning. And the question that hung in the air between them was not whether they could survive what was coming. It was whether everything they had just built was strong enough to withstand the one force that had shaped Han's entire existence. His father. If you stayed for this entire story, then you already know this is not over. Part 2 is coming. And what Han's father brings with him back to Seoul is going to test everything. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Because when the old boss returns, the rules change. All of them.